Welcome back. One of my favorites and yours, David Bell, resident RE/MAX Hall of Famer, Seattle Magazine's 5-star Best in Client Satisfaction Award winner. Every year it's been offered, and one of the pioneers of buyer agency in Washington State. You've been around, David.
I've been around. Ben, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Hey, welcome back from Mexico.
Thank you. It was a very nice time. I brought the weather.
Brought the weather. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I heard. Well, yeah.
82 degrees driving over here today.
Today?
Today, 82 degrees. I had to turn the air conditioner on.
I'm going to turn the show over to Heather from here on out. I will be outside if you need me.
Back from vacation.
So we can do an energy audit on the car, I guess, and see see how I need to save gas.
Well, let's talk about these audits because, people go through, they're pretty hyped up about a house. And when they're buying a house, you being one of the pioneers of buyers agencies in Washington, when people are buying a house, that inspection is, how do they feel about when they're, all of a sudden realize maybe the house that they wanted to buy isn't what it was all cracked up to be? I mean, how do you take people through that?
That's a great question. And it's probably one of the most stressful things that a buyer goes through. That and signing the final loan documents and reading all the fine print and doing all that stuff. We always tell them don't read it because you can't change the words of it anyway. So what I try to do is I don't try to do this.
Sounds like good advice.
It is. So what I do...
Just don't read it.
All the boilerplate on the final stuff. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. What I do is I really try to prepare a client for the inspection from the first time we even see the house. I'm always at the inspection. I think I missed one inspection 10 years ago because I had the flu. And I just felt terrible that I missed it. But I go into a house and I can see the things that are typically wrong with the house. What I don't do is I don't do crawl spaces and I don't do attics, so I don't know what's up there. But what we were talking about is really true. I mean, if you go up the stairs, this is interesting. If you go up the stairs of a house and it's all dark around the edges, the carpet's all dark, that's from air being sucked through there. So there is a lot of air loss and whatever in a house. And the reason you know that is because it's the dirt that it traps in the carpet, but it's sucked through those areas. So what you want to do is you really want the person to understand that even if they built a $2 million home, after it was done, they could have it inspected and they would find things that weren't perfect sometimes. So you put it in their mind that this inspection is really necessary. Number one, if there's issues, if there are water issues, if there are foundation issues, those are the two biggest, then we may just want to walk away. We also scope sewers. So we want on the west side, on older houses, we bring a sewer guy in, runs a camera.
I bet you don't do attics, basements, or sewer lines.
Oh, I do the sewer lines.
You do.
I'm right there. I'm watching that thing.
I just think of Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah, that's what a great show that was. Great movie. No, because that can be a minimum of $10,000 and up to $30,000 or $40,000 depending on where the house is. If it's up on a high hill, they got to dig it all the way down to the street. I mean, it can be really, really expensive. So what you want to do is you know that there are going to be issues with the house. These are primarily maintenance issues with the house, and so they have no surprises. You have to spend money on a house once you own it. Even a brand new house, you have to spend money on it, and you have to know what to watch for. So they're really important, and a good inspector is worth their weight in gold.
Yeah, and that, because people think it's their dream home. It's always cracked up. It's your dream home. It's your dream home. Well, and so that ability to, I guess, read into an inspection and then separate yourself from it and go, you know what, okay, there's certain things that are right or wrong. I mean, that's something that's got to be hard for you to maybe help people weed through.
I don't know if it's hard. I mean, you learn how to do it over time. And, I mean, I can count hundreds of times where depending on the market and depending on what happens with offers, and like today we're in a seller's market again. People are waiving inspections. And that's not necessarily the right thing to do, but sometimes it might be.
It seems crazy to me.
No, if a house has problems, you can normally see those problems pretty easily. And if it depends on the house, depends on the style of the house, it depends on when it was built, where it is. There's a lot of variables. I don't recommend not doing an inspection, but sometimes people do that.
Doesn't it kind of come down to, though, if it's perfect and there's nothing wrong with it, yes, but if there's anything wrong, it's really hard to tell the depth of what could be the problems?
That can be, but I've got a client right now, and he needs to buy something under $300,000 in Seattle. And you ought to see the houses we're looking at for under $300,000 in Seattle. And it's not, we were in one Saturday, there were 3 cracks, 2.5 to 4 inches wide in the foundation in the basement. They'd been filled, and they had moved since they were filled. So we don't know when they were filled. There were many cracks on the floor, and 3 sides of the house had dropped as much as 6 inches. And now, is this a bad house to buy? Depends on the price we can buy it at. It happened to be $100,000 overpriced. But what we're going to do, if he wants to look at that, we're going to bring a structural engineer in to make sure it's okay. Now, another house that on a different client, it had dropped. It was on a hill. We had somebody look at the hill. The hill was stable. The trees were all growing straight up, so there were no issues with the hill sliding. And all it needed to be done is there was a drainage issues, and most movement, not all, but most movements of houses are a water issue. There's a downspout that is plugged or something, and it just runs down, and it washes out some of the dirt under the foundation, and the foundation moves. Very, very normal. And it happened, 65, 70 years ago when the house was built, and no movement since. But that had to be corrected. So pipe piles had to be put in. It was about a $12,000 fix.
So, it sounds, we're here with David Bell with Remax Metro East Side. And so, David, when you start helping somebody buy a house and they're seeing these things, what do you feel like, what do people need to maybe do? These things are wrong, right? Is it become a numbers game? Is that
it's
really
a numbers game, and you point it out. So there's as few surprises as possible. And you say, okay, look, there's some water issues here. There's some settlement issues here. There may be cracks. There may not be cracks. Or here's a crack in the foundation, and it was filled. The side was filled really a long time ago. There's been no more movement. And it really depends on the price you pay, what the circumstances are, and what sort of good advice you get. You have to have somebody give you really good advice. So your initial inspection is really important.
Do you ever tell people to walk away?
Absolutely. And we've walked away. We walked away. There was one of my first one was in Ballard. And I don't know, there were 3 guys living there. They were young guys, and they loved to party, I guess. And the inspector went in the crawl space underneath the house, and they'd never connected the main sewer line from the house to the sewer. And we walked away. We just said, see ya, bye.
I can't believe you guys walked in.
Well, I didn't. So I said I don't do crawl spaces.
Right. Oh, man. That's incredible.
And so, yeah, we've walked away. Sometimes you get in and you find cement block foundation. First of all, if I see that, I don't even want anybody to buy it. But if it's disguised and we find it, we normally walk away. Because back then they didn't reinforce it.
And what about, there's no such thing as the perfect home either, though. You can find all these issues. Right. And you call it a numbers game, but is that an expectation a buyer should have going in? Is, look, we're going to look at a lot of houses.
That's reality. So they've got to have that expectation going in. If you're working with a real estate agent that doesn't bring the light to the table and say, hey, we're not going to buy a perfect house. If you can spend $400,000 or $5 million, you're going to find problems with the house. And then it's just how big are those problems and how much are you willing to take care of? And how much are you paying for it? So are we going to buy a $5 million house that the electrical panel's all screwed up in? Yeah, I had clients that did. And because they got the actual house they wanted, and the people wouldn't come down in price. So they did it, but they knew what they were getting into, and it was about a $5,000 fix. So, what is that?
About $5,000.
Yeah, on a $5 million house.
Pretty small amount. So I guess, when you start thinking about what people go through in this inspection process, it's kind of a crossroads in the transaction.
It is. It is, and it's really, really stressful. And so the job the inspector does, and how the inspector tells the people what's wrong with certain things, is really an important thing. You have some inspectors that will say, "Oh my God, I found water in the basement," and well, the water in the basement, what's it from? So you have to go find what it's from. I had a listing on Federal on Capitol Hill, really great street, and they painted the basement floor with a high gloss enamel. And I sold it, the inspection, the guy, the story I was told from the other agent, they were walking down the stairs, and the inspector looks down at the floor and says, "Oh my God, there's a foot of water in the basement." And they turn around and walked away. And the agent said, we're pulling out of this thing, because there's water. And I went, "There's what?" I mean, the people had already moved to the East Coast. So I went down to the basement, and there wasn't any water. But as you're walking down the stairs, because it was built in 1908, and the old lights down there, it looked like there was water. But if you went down and put your hand down, it was perfectly dry. So an inspector is really an important thing.
Yeah. Well, and as important as it is to get an inspection, I think having somebody who can walk you through and help you make decisions, because the inspection is like data. Yeah. You have to make a decision from that data is really what transpires.
Right. And I tell you, and that's one of the most important parts of my job with buyers is during the inspection, is to make sure that we make a smart decision. There's certain things that are okay, and there's certain things that aren't okay. And if you run into a sewer line that has a buckle in it, that's an expensive fix. And you don't know how much it's going to cost until you really start doing it.
But sometimes a leaky faucet can be fixed.
Yeah.
Well, David, thanks so much for joining us. We do have to go to break. Ryan Leopold's going to join us again. There's a new program coming up. We're going to talk about how you might be able to save money so you can fix that leaky faucet, even if you've tried many times before to do it. We'll be right back after this break.